Folks, it's already happening just as many of us predicted it would. On Saturday, Sunday, and even Monday, much of the world, shockingly, even the members of the squad, condemned the savage attack on Israel and the hundreds who were slaughtered, kidnapped, and brutalized. But now that Israel has responded, and rightfully so, the narrative has shifted as expected. Yeah, the Hamas squad, as they shall heretofore be referred to as, well, they've shown their true colors.
Congresswoman, do you have a comment on Hamas terrorists chopping off babies' heads? You have nothing to say about Hamas terrorists chopping off babies' heads? Do you condone what Hamas has done, chopping off babies' heads, burning children alive, raping women in the street?
Despicable, but not surprising. That aside, something I envy about Israel and the Israeli leaders, they don't F around. When they say they're going to level you, they're going to level you. And if you don't want to be leveled, you shouldn't attack, you shouldn't kidnap, rape, slaughter, and brutalize the Israeli people. Israel has declared war, and this is what war looks like. It's not pretty. Civilians die. That's the sick and sad reality of war and the collateral damage that comes with it. Nobody, exception terrorists, relishes the thought of innocents being killed, whether they be Jewish, Muslim, Christian, Buddhist, what have you. But it's certainly worth noting the kind of animals Israel is dealing with. In fact, calling them animals is an insult to animals. The kind of people who are willing to execute the elderly live on Facebook. The kind of people who are willing to behead babies. The kind of people who are willing to kidnap, rape, and parade around the bodies of young women. The kind of people who use their own people as human shields and place their weapons and their resources in civilian areas on purpose. These are not people, and these are not militants either. These are Islamic terrorists who will and did happily kill innocent people in the name of their religion, and they will not stop until they are exterminated. You don't deal with terrorists through diplomacy or peace treaties or ceasefires. You deal with terrorists by eradicating them. It's also important to note here that Palestinians elected Hamas to represent them in 2005, and over the weekend, Hamas carried out the most egregious act of mass murder against Jews since the Holocaust. Yet, some Democrats just cannot bring themselves to condemn it, like this fella here, Denver State Representative Tim Hernandez.
And I think it's despicable what they're protesting for and what you're protesting for. And the fact that you can't condemn women and children and elderly people being murdered in the streets.
What about it?
Do you condemn it?
I already said.
Why can't you say yes?
Because I already gave you my answer.
You didn't give an answer.
Can't say it, won't say it, and why? You know, I'm not the first to say this, but it's worth me reiterating. If Hamas stopped attacking Israel, there would be peace. If Israel stopped defending itself, it would cease to exist. Clear distinction there. Joining me now with his personal and expert analysis is Israeli political strategist Philippe Azaline. Philippe, it's been a long time since I've had the pleasure of talking to you. I wish it was under different circumstances, but I know that you've been experiencing a lot of this firsthand. So let me know what this weekend and this week has been like for you thus far.
So, Tommy, it's nice to see you after a long time again. You see, I've aged. Maybe most of it happened this weekend. I've just made it out of the country. I didn't want my kids to be around that. I was thinking about their mental health. I was there until yesterday. I think it's probably one of the worst massacres in Jewish history that we went through. Not Israeli history, of Jewish history. It is beyond what I can describe to see those images of people being butchered for hours like if it were a sport. Imagine like the Sandy Hook shooting, but 30 times on and on and on. And then people being taken from their families to Gaza. It just fills you with dread. And at one point, it's numbness, it's terror. And you have to add to that the constant wailing of sirens of rockets. 2 years ago, I thought rockets were the scariest thing. My 9-year-old son, who still believed in Santa at the time, was in the bunker as we heard loud booms, and he was shaking and crying and telling me, I'm going to die, I'm going to die. And it was a really hard moment. This time dwarfs that. It's just complete fear, a feeling that the country can't really always have everybody's back, and the fact that you're dealing with absolute evil. Even the Nazis hid what they did. These guys raping children on purpose, raping children on purpose, filming it, and then putting it out there because they're proud. Now, I just want to say one last thing. This was extremely carefully planned. It cost a ton of money. Iran was involved. It had zero strategic value. It brought nothing to the Palestinians. They put endless effort and intelligence into planning a mass slaughter that brings nothing to them, nothing except the joy of killing.
Philippe, I know that you're obviously an expert on all of this, and I want to lean into that expertise because there's a lot of Americans who see this happening. They remember it happening some years ago. I mean, this has been a continuous cycle of violence. It's never really ended. It's just gotten hot and then cooled down. But I want you to help me give my audience a lesson here into the history and into the policy that's gone on between Israel, the Palestinian people, Hamas, because there's a lot of people that are uneducated that don't understand. There's a lot of people that are running with the narrative that the Palestinian people live in an open-air prison and that the Israelis torment and terrorize them and have been for some years. Please give my audience an understanding of how this has gone on in the last several years and where we are now.
Thanks. So that's an amazing question. Thank you. I'll start with the last part. Why do people think Israel's the bad guy, essentially? Like the politician we just saw who refused to condemn something that, would you not condemn zombies attacking? So like it's crazy to even hesitate. So I'll start with the end. There is a very strong concerted propaganda campaign to exploit, I can only call it to exploit the natural kindness of American people. American people are naturally kind, they have compassion, and there's been a campaign that projects what these people did onto Israel. You kill children. You attack them. Now, these people attacked a music festival, right? They gunned down for hours hundreds of people. It could have been like the Stagecoach Festival or Coachella. And yet the propaganda has been exploiting very carefully the feelings of Westerners to cast Israelis as the bad guys so they have moral cover to do this. Why? This takes me back to the first part of your question. The Turkish Empire, the Ottoman Empire, used to control the Middle East, essentially, until 1920. After World War I, it was dismantled, and that area was split into states. The area that is now Israel, the West Bank, Gaza, and Jordan was supposed to be, by international law, a Jewish state. Not enough Jews were there or showed up, and a big influx of Arab population came to compound itself to the native population of Muslims, Arabs, Christians, a mix. And for whatever reasons, mismanagement, animosity, nationalism, they started fighting. And the proposal was to split that area into two states after lopping off most of it and creating Jordan. But whatever area stayed in the Holy Land, okay, let's call it that, was supposed to be two states. The Jews accepted, the Arabs rejected, and they attacked. And since then, there's been efforts all the time to attack and destroy Israel, openly. This is not my opinion, it's been the stated position. Now, obviously, Israel made tremendous mistakes, could have dealt better with many situations, but fundamentally, there's a rejection of Israel's existence until very recently. There might be a peace deal now with Saudi Arabia that would kind of tip the scales. In 1967, there was another war where the Arab states attacked, or were going to attack, and Israel took over territories called the West Bank, Judea and Samaria in biblical terms, and Gaza and other areas. And the population there started identifying as Palestinian in 1967, mostly. Before that, it was a mix of Jordanian, Egyptian. There was an identity that wasn't so much coalesced around the area. It was pan-Arab. I'm trying not to make this too complicated, but the Palestinian population really started to forge an identity separate from the Arab world at that time. And that's when terrorism started with Yasser Arafat and the PLO, which is now the Palestinian Authority, mostly. Egypt was supporting it. And since then, there's been waves and waves of terrorist attacks, Israeli retaliation, attempts at peace accords. And in 1993, they started to give Palestinian areas independence. But instead of bringing peace, it made the violence worse. You used to have riots with stone throwing and stabbings. Now you had buses blowing up, machine gun attacks. Now you have rockets. Now you have these massacres. It's unimaginable scale, like 1,000 people murdered in a day or two. That's essentially the history. It's super sad because it's a great land. On an individual basis, I appreciate the Arabs in Israel and Palestinians I've met tremendously. But something happens on the collective where there's such a hatred that, like in Gaza, they're willing to invest so many resources just to kill instead of building. And that's something that's extremely sad when you have children growing up there. And my research is into how to make people communicate so they won't fight. So for me, like it's even more depressing.
Do you see there ever being peace in this region? And I ask that because we know that the propaganda campaign, the indoctrination from birth to death for a lot of these people is the same. They hate America, they hate Israel, they hate the Jewish people, they hate anybody who is not Muslim. So I ask you that because there's been a lot of discussion about brokering a peace deal, or could there possibly be a Palestinian state that was independent that could thrive on its own? Would this ever stop? Or would there be a constant effort by Hamas, by Iran, by other Muslim fundamentalist countries that would like to see Israel eradicated? Is this something that's going to be ongoing for eternity?
I hope not. I'm a bit optimistic, and I'll tell you why, even though it's extremely hard these days. I do polling, I do research and opinion, and I can show you how people's opinion, even in the Middle East, can be influenced by pressing the right button so that they favor more peace than other avenues like war. That said, the political culture in the Middle East, in the Arab world, is very, very brutal. And it's going to take a long road. It's going to be a long road before there is more of a individualist, liberal kind of mindset. Still, if you look at the Middle East, the countries are becoming more moderate than they were 5-10 years ago. That's the result of ISIS. When people see too much violence and they suffer, that's when they tend to learn. So it's not going to be fixed anytime soon. People were celebrating in the streets. You see what you're showing, that protest, I think it was in Montreal or somewhere in Canada. It's despicable that people would celebrate what happened. It's like celebrating the KKK, but 100 times worse. There's still a huge problem. There will be violence. Israel now feels it has to deal a severe blow to Gaza. It's going to cause more rancor, but I don't think there's any other thing you can do when your country is attacked like that and your civilians slaughtered. I think there's hope in the very long term. I think we can hope for fewer all-out wars like this, but for the short term, it's going to be very hard. And it's going to take a long time to deprogram a lot of these minds. And what's happening is that on the Israeli side, when they see this, it makes people angry and hard. So whatever flexibility there was on the Israeli side is gone now, because they're waking up to like, this is stupid. We're getting killed. We're getting slaughtered. Fences are not going to do the job. So short term, I'm pessimistic. Long term, I have to be optimistic because I have kids. I have little kids.
The Palestinian people, do they want to be represented by Hamas? Are they too brainwashed to know the difference? I mean, there is a discussion here to be had about, of course, the civilians who are collateral damage, the civilians that are used as human shields. But is the indoctrination so strong in these people that they look to Hamas as their savior, as their leadership? What is the mentality of a lot of the Palestinians that you know, a lot of the Palestinians that you've studied?
So it varies. Palestinians have diverse origins. They have diverse mindsets. Unfortunately, there's been traditionally a lot of people who support the extremists. Like you mentioned, Hamas won an election, but it won an election in 2007. You're showing scenes of Gas the Jews. It kind of goes against what I'm saying, but there is a diversity of opinion there. There are moderates. There are a lot of people who suffer and hate Hamas. They're not allowed to speak. Unfortunately, there's a lot of people who do like Hamas, and Hamas is a Palestinian movement. And they're going to need to sort out also what they want for themselves. But it's thankfully not everybody. No, it's not everybody. Unfortunately, it's too many people that support Hamas and have opinions like what we're seeing, the awful things that are being said in Australia, of all places. I think the indoctrination can be contained. I think there are moderate Palestinians. Maybe events like this will shame the Palestinians enough for the moderate voices to be more assertive. I think what the world needs to do now is shame the Palestinians for what happened, even though this does not represent all the Palestinians. This represents Hamas, which is one group, the Gaza Strip, not the West Bank. And even there must be opposition. But we need to shame the people who can have an influence on Hamas. This does not bring them honor like they think. It brings them shame.
It's just hard to see that when you see so many that are calling these people martyrs. Of course, you know, we've seen the language, we've seen the videos, we see the protests going on here in the United States, really around the world, discussing a lot of people that don't really know what they're protesting for, a lot of just ignorance, a lot of American celebrities who want to back Israel, but they can't, they feel as though they cannot, they still hide behind this notion of free Palestine.
So I want to talk about that. That's a super important point. You've always been one of the only people to raise this. This propaganda campaign, I saw it on campuses. I've studied it. There is an effort to exploit the hardships that American youth in particular go through on college campuses. Social anxiety, financial anxiety. It's very hard to be a young person now. Like Gen Z is just, you know, imagine what they went through. I grew up in Gen X, everything was easy, or much easier. And this campaign exploits it. And if you end up supporting Israel, you're isolated on campus, you're shamed online, you're silenced, like what they do with conservatives, but worse sometimes. And celebrities get threatened. So there's a bullying mentality that comes on the one hand. On the other hand, you have these idiots who are in Australia and instead of enjoying their life, celebrate the death of other people. And it's like Twitter, the Twitter effect, where a few people cause such a loud noise that that's all that's seen. And Jews and pro-Israel kids on campus are scared. And I see it in the polling I do, like very recently, how the personal dimension of what these kids and young people are going through affects what political opinions they adopt. They're basically forced by bullying, by pressure, by compassion abuse to adopt extreme positions. Now, none of this is to say the Palestinians don't have a lot of grievances that are legitimate, that Israel doesn't make. I think Israel makes tremendous mistakes. And if you'd spoken to me 2 weeks ago, we would have been talking about what I think Netanyahu does wrong. But to turn that into hatred, into support for murder is the result of bullying on campuses, at least in the United States and in the West. In Gaza, it's a bit different. It's like you said, indoctrination. But again, there are voices on the other side. There are Palestinian voices on the other side. They're not loud enough. They need to be protected. And this kind of stuff needs to be shamed. To have pity now for the Palestinian cause in a way that doesn't exclude Hamas now is the worst thing you could do, right? You have to empower the people who are against them, even if they're the minority. I don't know if they're the minority. I think they're the minority in some cases. They were the minority in polling. I don't think the majority support this, but I don't know. But whoever is against this in the Palestinian people needs to be empowered, and this needs to be shamed.
Last question I have for you, kind of going along with that, I'm going to talk about it in my commentary at the end of the show, but something, you spend a lot of time on college campuses and you studied this. So what I am so confused by is this. On college campuses, and especially with Gen Zers even, they have a real affinity for LGBTQ plus culture. That is their battle cry and has been their battle cry predominantly for the last 5 years. That has been their cause. Now we're seeing some of those same people who are part of this LGBTQ movement, also part of the Free Palestine, pro-Hamas, pro-terror movement. Philippe, do they not understand what Hamas does to the LGBTQ community? Do they not understand the doctrine? Because to me, it's stupidity. But I'm not sure if there's something else to that. Maybe you could help educate them.
Somebody wrote on the internet, it's like cows for McDonald's. Yeah. cows cheering on McDonald's. I don't know if they understand, but emotion will always trump reason. The woke movement, the intersectionality movement in the United States captures the attention, the minds, and the hearts of young people who feel excluded, who don't feel they have what it takes maybe to achieve the American dream at a time where it's very, very hard to achieve it. And they're attracted to movements that posit like some powerful force as the reason for everybody's problems, right? It's the capitalist, it's the white man, it's the businesses, and in some cases, there's some of that needs to be addressed. But these movements have been hijacked for a long time now, but especially in recent years, by Islamists who have used it to turn Jews into the bad guy for everybody, right? So they'll go to Mexican students or students of Mexican origin and say, oh, you guys have to go, you have to deal with offense and being excluded from the United States. We deal with offense, right? Completely obliterating the context. They'll speak to Black Americans who have suffered through racism and they say, oh, you're suffering racism, we suffered racism. They'll compare themselves to the Native Americans. They will exploit everybody's grievances, these propaganda campaigns, which often are not even led by Palestinians, by the way. They're just campaigns of people who want to create hatred for Israel. They will hijack these movements and turn Jews in Israel into the bad guy. And so when you're LGBTQ, you might feel you're not included in society. You might feel oppressed in a certain sense, and it's very appealing to feel this solidarity. And if the price is to turn a blind eye to some logic and blame Israel, it could be very satisfying to feel that solidarity. And that's what they exploit. That's what I mean by compassion abuse.
It's really something. Well, Philippe, I appreciate you taking so much time. I know that it has been a week from hell for you. We're praying for you, your family, your safety. Thank you so much for giving us so much context and analysis. I always appreciate it from you, and please be safe.
Thank you for having me, and I'm safe now because I got out with people that are really going through a hard time, so whatever support you can give them, it really makes a difference.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Philippe.